This is Dorie Clark, author of Entrepreneurial You, and you are listening to The Speaking Show with David Newman.
All right, I am here with the amazing and incredible Dorie Clark, author of the latest, the greatest, many books prior, but the latest and greatest is Entrepreneurial You. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
David, thank you for having me. So fun to talk with you.
You are doing all kinds of fun things, and I know that you talk about this a little bit in the book, but how did you come to do the work that you're doing today? Give us just the quick 3-minute journey that brings us to Dorie today.
Absolutely. The really short version is I was a political journalist. I got laid off from it. And as folks probably have seen in the journalism industry, it's not exactly booming. So I had a hard time getting another job and needed to reinvent myself. And so I ended up in a section of different things, working on political campaigns, doing press and media relations for them. I hasten to add, not the most recent one. And then I ran a nonprofit for a couple of years. And it was in the course of running this nonprofit that I realized, running a nonprofit is basically the same thing as running a business. Oh, wait, I could probably have a lot less stress and make a lot more money if I were running my own business. And so that is what I have been doing for the past 12 years.
So when you started out, and again, you're very transparent in this book. I got to tell you, I just love the book. If you guys don't have a copy of this, go out and get it on Entrepreneurial You. And it's sort of the third in a trilogy, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well. You're very transparent that when you started out, you had no idea what to charge. You had no idea what the marketplace looked like. Someone said, "Hey, Dorie, can you help me out?" It's like, "How much?" "Yeah, like $100. I'll come do stuff for $100. And then you started to talk to some other experts and go, "Wait a second, why am I doing stuff for $100? So talk about that progression a little bit, about just the whole self-esteem, self-worth, self-value, because that thread really runs through the book. And I think it's really, really important for us to talk about because a lot of our listeners are going through this as well.
Early on, David, I can't even tell you how many gigs I did for a couple $100 a piece. I was just running around chasing engagements, and they seemed like good money to me at the time because my frame of reference was as an hourly employee. And so I thought, oh, this one could pay my cable bill and this one could pay my phone bill. And, ultimately you realize that these are not sustainable figures, and it's not a sustainable way of life if you're going to be a self-employed entrepreneur. And something that really proved determinative for me was making a conscious and concerted investment in building my network. Because if you do not have a strong network, first of all, you don't really have a good sense in terms of the marketplace about which of your ideas are good or not. You also have a lot of trouble figuring out pricing and what is an industry norm and where you should be positioning yourself. And you also don't have people who are advocating for you and suggesting you for things. But if you do, on the contrary, have those things, it really helps to move your business along. In fact, a methodology that I teach in my books, like Stand Out and Entrepreneurial You, and in a course that I do called Recognized Expert, is that there's 3 critical components to becoming a recognized expert in one's field. Someone that's sought after, highly paid. And those 3 things are content creation, because you need people to know what your ideas are so they know what to reach out to you for. There's social proof, which is basically what is your credibility in the marketplace? How are you signaling to people that you are worth paying attention to? And then finally, it's your network, for the reasons stated above, that you need a peer group to be able to help you see what is possible and to help spread the word about who you are and what you can offer.
Totally fantastic. And, let me also jump in. I want to pick up on just some of the tactical, practical things that you put in the book, some of which are awesome, some of which I've got a little bit of a debate. We're having a friendly debate right now, although I totally get where you're coming from. We're going to go to page 84, my friend. Page 84 of Entrepreneurial You. The headline is Speak for Free. Now, I know that you did this early on. I did this early on. We're going to fast forward and give the punchline. If it's the right audience and the right group and the right reason, I will still speak for free. I believe you will still speak for free if it's strategic. I think where people are misguided is they feel that there's some gradual incremental, it's going to have to take years. Like first I have to charge 1,000. And then maybe next year I'll charge 1,200. And then the year after that, I can go to 1,500. And I know that you've seen this with your students. And I know I've seen this with my clients as well. If they're a successful professional and they're out there undercharging, under earning, once you flip the switch in their brain and you say, dude, I don't know what you're thinking, but you should be out there charging $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. What's wrong with you? They drink that Kool-Aid. They believe in us as mentors and coaches, and they start landing those $7,000 or $8,000 speaking gigs, even if they'd never been paid that much before. I wish more people had that DNA. So what's your thought about kind of quantum leaping this versus the slow, painful, incremental crawl up the mountaintop?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with you, David, that if you are starting out at a low price and there's a sense that you can only raise your rates, whatever, 5% a year or something like that, it's going to take you a lifetime to be able to build a sustainable income. The way that I think about it instead is that, of course, everybody, presuming that you're not a celebrity for some other reason, you've been on reality television or something like that, everybody starts at the bottom. Everybody starts out completely unknown, and you really do have to prove yourself. And oftentimes, speaking for free is a way to do that when you have no sort of brand identity, so to speak. But very quickly as possible, you need to try to raise yourself up to levels where it is sustainable. And the markers that I use for something like that is, what does your social proof warrant? What is it that your credibility is indicating? And so every time you are hitting a new milestone of credibility, I would consider that a legitimate opportunity and excuse for you to raise your rates. So for instance, once you publish a book, you should be raising your rates because that's an extra level of credibility that you have and that you bring to bear. And, from the perspective of the person hiring you, it's also a risk mitigation tactic. If you have a book, now, it's debatable whether this is true in 100% of cases, but presumably, if you have a book, that is a pretty good proxy for saying you are an expert on the subject. You know enough to have written 200 or however many pages on that. And so it lowers their risk in bringing you in to speak. So that would be a reason to raise your rates. If you have started to publish regularly in a mainstream publication or an industry-specific publication that's relevant to that industry, that gives you extra credibility, which enables you to raise your rates. If your book has become a bestseller, or if you have taken on a prominent leadership role in the industry, or if you have started to keynote on other prominent stages. These are all really good reasons to raise your rates. And I encourage people to do that as rapidly as they can to get to a level that is sustainable. And by looking around at your peers and developing those relationships, you begin to get a sense of what is appropriate. Nobody's going to go from $0 to $30,000, but you can certainly get up to reasonably high levels that people would be happy and proud of much faster than you might imagine.
Well, let's pick up on that social proof and the external credibility. Obviously, a book, the way that you write a book that's not a quick thing, right? You do a lot of research. You're going down the traditional publishing route. So that adds another 12 to 15 months to the equation. But you mentioned in Entrepreneurial You that if you could get a column, and you just mentioned that you can get a column in an industry publication or even a mainstream publication that your target market reads, Forbes, Huffington Post, fastcompany.com, Entrepreneur Magazine, any of these places. I know that you've done this very, very successfully with the Harvard Business Review, which is kind of the ultimate, right? That's the ultimate publication if you're in the business realm. What are some inside baseball tricks? Not that we're going to trick our way in, but what are some shortcuts that if you have vetted really good, really solid content and you just want to get a publication's attention, whether it's Forbes or Huffington Post or entrepreneur.com or Harvard Business Review, we might as well go big. What are some of the things that you coach your clients to do as the first steps to get in there?
Yeah, well, it's actually appropriate that we're having this conversation, David, because as we are recording this later this week, in fact, on Friday, so a few days from now, I'm going to be leading a live workshop in Boston on breaking into high-profile publications. So it's certainly something that I talk about frequently with folks that I work with. So broadly speaking, there's a few things to keep in mind. The first, of course, is the quality of what you're writing. The second is the marketing that enables you to break in. So let me address both in turn. In terms of the quality of what you're putting out. The most critical thing that people really need to be focused on and be aware of, which I think sometimes they miss, is that no matter how good in a quote unquote objective sense your ideas are, if they are not formatted and presented in a way that is relevant to the publication you're targeting, you're not going to get anywhere. They are not going to bend the rules of their publication for you. They might do it for somebody that is the most famous person in the industry. But if you're just breaking in, there's absolutely no way. You need to bend to them rather than the other way around. And so that means being very cognizant of things like what are their standards in terms of length. It means that you really need to study in depth the publication to understand what are the topics that they typically write about. What is the type of angle that they write about? I mean, a lot of times you'll get people who are trying to submit like op-ed or analysis type pieces to a publication that really only does straight news. That's just not going to work. So understanding the voice of it. For Harvard Business Review, for instance, they really pride themselves on trying to be, you could say a sort of intellectual business publication. And so they really appreciate it. I mean, I would say it's quasi-mandatory for your pieces to have a lot of research in them. Now, it doesn't mean you're necessarily doing original research. Most speakers are not. I mean, there's some exceptions. Sally Hogshead has done a really great job with this, but it means that you should be conversant with the research in your field and be able to cite it and to link to it. That's something that a lot of other publications may not require, that are not necessarily as intellectually rigorous. But for HBR, they want to see that you understand and are citing the research. So it's really immersing yourself and reading in a deep way so that you can understand how to speak their language. Now, when it comes to marketing yourself to the publications, as with all things, as with getting speaking gigs, I would say that probably the best thing you can do is to get a warm lead. So if you have friends or colleagues who write for that publication, reaching out to them and seeing if they'd be willing to do an intro. And the caveat that I have here is that a lot of people do this wrong. I have gotten untold numbers of people who've literally met me once at a cocktail party, and then the next day they'll email me and be like, hey, can you introduce me to your editor at HBR? And it's just a gross misunderstanding because this is a relationship that has taken a great deal of political capital to cultivate. And what they're not getting is that there's like 20 other people that are emailing me every week asking for the same thing. And so it needs to be someone that you have a deep relationship with if you're going to ask for the intro. Now, the exception to this is that you can always ask for advice, and the person may proactively offer to make the intro. But at a minimum, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I've been, thinking about trying to do this. What would be your advice to me? And, then it gives them room to address the request however they want. But there are ways that you can break in cold. I did this. I broke into Forbes cold. You just need to understand that it is a little bit of a numbers game. When I was breaking into Forbes, I had made a list of 24 publications that I had reached out to. Forbes was one of them on the list. Out of the 24, Forbes was the only one that wanted me. Now, for most of these, of course, I was not turned down. In fact, nobody actually turned me down. That's not really what they do. They just blow you off. So you have to be very patient in breaking in, but you can send short pitches to them. And that's what I did. And eventually you kind of wear them down and can break in somewhere. So those are just a few tips that I hope might be helpful to listeners.
Absolutely. Love those. And it's so funny, right? You never hear no, but you just don't hear yes.
That's right.
It's a cold, cruel world out there, Dorie Clark. That's all I'm saying.
You got it.
Cruel world. Let's talk about all of your investable opportunities. And let's talk about the investable opportunities that all of us should be thinking about, which you do a brilliant job. I'm telling you, I don't usually blow smoke up guests' tushies, but I will tell you, this is an awesome book. It's really the handbook and the operations manual for a complete thought leadership business.
Thank you. That's really kind.
Well, yes, my pleasure. Having said that, the thing that scares me, it scares me to death, is when you talk about having offerings at every price point. So, because I'll tell you why. We're doing a little bit of David Newman therapy right now. I was the guy that was Mr. $97 a month. Buy my course for $9.97. Buy my course for $4.97. And 10 years ago, 7 years ago, 5 years ago, that's all I did. Now it is a premium offering at a premium fee. I don't really sell anything for less than $10,000. And the mantra that an early mentor of mine said that I ignored for years was, be expensive, or be free. So all the free content, all of the magnetic marketing that we do, all of the webinars, the videos, the articles, all of that is top notch and it doesn't cost a penny. When people want to work with an expert, tell us about the pros and cons of, well, you can get Dorie for a couple $100 in one format and one flavor, and you can get Dorie for $20,000, $30,000, and that's a different flavor. It's almost like, okay, here's a Bentley, but then here's a mid-priced Bentley, and here's a kind of a really kind of cheap and affordable Bentley. I'm guessing that you don't see it that way. So help me get over be expensive or be free.
Yes. Well, I think in general, that's a good mantra for sure, because when you create the aura of scarcity, as we know from Robert Cialdini, that is one of the things that really compels people to buy, and it compels people to buy at a high price point. However, the way that I would think of it is this. If we're looking for an analogy, I would point to TED. Now, TED is currently charging $10,000 per seat to go to their annual conference in Vancouver. And, I've been to it a couple of times. I've seen, sort of how it all works. And, they don't have any problems filling the seats. They are oversubscribed. They fill it up basically, within a week of announcing. If you want to go the next year, you have to sign up about, let's say, 10 months in advance. If they wanted to dramatically expand it, they could probably triple the size, and they would fill it. Now, you would think that this wouldn't happen. You'd think it's like the opposite because, well, why are you going? Because all the talks come out for free on video. What's the point? But of course, the point of TED is not to go and sit and listen to talks. That is interesting and that is fun to see them live. But you're not going to pay $10,000 just like, oh, well, I saw this talk live.
Right.
The reason you go is because TED has become a prominent cultural phenomenon, and people have heard about it in the first place because they've seen the videos and it sounds cool and it sounds exclusive. And if you say that you've been to the TED conference, everyone says, oh my God, TED, yes. You saw that talk by Simon Sinek. You saw that talk by Amy Cuddy, like whatever. And it develops an extra level of cachet. And so that wouldn't be the case if TED was only confined to the 2,000 people in the room and no one else had ever heard of it. It would be a lot harder to market. And so the way that I think of it, you don't want to be giving yourself away, access to yourself for, a couple $100. It certainly devalues you. However, if you can give people a way in, if you can give them access to you so that they become familiar with you, familiar with your ideas, those are the people who are going to want most to be able to spend more time with you at the higher levels. And so I don't think it in any way devalues the relationship that I would have with people or their desire to spend time with me if they're able to buy a $20 book that shares my ideas. I don't think it devalues the relationship if they buy a 3-hour online course that I've done for $200, that doesn't have any effort for me. This is sort of a thing that was recorded once and it's just total scalable income. The things where people do interact with me, whether it's a speech or an in-person mastermind workshop or a year-long mastermind that I run, those are things that are, in the thousands or in the tens of thousands of dollars. And so I would argue that in many cases, the lower price offerings actually stoke the desire rather than diminish the desire for people to partake at a higher level.
Wow. All right. I've got 17 follow-up questions, but I'm going to try and stay focused. That was so great. Thank you. Whoa, what a great interview. Are you taking notes? Remember to visit thespeakingshow.com for complete show notes, links, downloads, and resources related to this episode. See you over there. You mentioned TED, and I want to kind of take a little quick sidebar. Because you do so much speaking, because you're so involved in the industry, because you've seen so many different types of conferences and formats, both as a speaker, obviously, and then also some as an audience member. Do you think that the TED format is the future of speaking? Do you think that conferences and live gatherings of humans is going to change and morph into some more of a peer-to-peer connection where it's not so much speaker and audience, but it's more kind of group masterminding and collaboration? Do you see the entire conference and meetings industry imploding at some point? Do you see the pay-to-play opportunities to be something that's coming down the pike? What's your finger on the pulse of what you think will happen? And then what do you wish would happen? What would be the ideal future of the conference and meetings industry from where you're sitting?
Yeah, that's a very rich question. I think that the theory that a lot of my work is predicated on is that I think that in our internet enabled society, we are going to see on many levels that, for better or for worse, inequality in various forms is going to continue to spread. By which I mean, when I say inequality, I don't, it has sort of a loaded political connotations, but really what I mean is the 80-20 principle magnified so that it becomes a 90-10 principle, a 95-5 principle, meaning that people who are the winners currently will continue to have that magnified because their fame, their repute, their desirability is only going to grow given the sort of virality that the internet enables and just the ease in which they can reach more people. And so what my work really is focused on is helping to take speakers, consultants, authors, etc., to be able in a really competitive environment to be the people that are the winners. You are always going to be in demand in the marketplace. As a speaker, as someone that is brought into conferences, if you are someone that is considered a celebrity guest, and that doesn't necessarily mean a Kardashian celebrity, but you can be a business celebrity. Those are people that are always going to be doing well. And it is the best form of career insurance if when people say, oh, you got David Newman to speak at your conference, that everybody nods and says, oh, wow, you are so lucky. I think that there's a hollowing out of the middle. And the people who, maybe have been going along and, getting gigs, but without really building a strong brand, they are going to be the people that are vulnerable in today's economy. And so I am really focused on and committed to helping people build the tools that will enable them to kind of have the brand recognition that allows them to be continually sought after. Because no matter what else happens in the marketplace, if you are a conference organizer, you want to have a name on your marquee that is impressive to your bosses and is impressive to the attendees. And if you can be, as the speaker, that person who is impressive to them, then you have the ability to just protect your future and really have it grow moving forward.
What a great answer. And you mentioned two things that I want to jump off on again: career insurance and building a strong brand. There are so many executives now, so many professionals that are speaking at conferences, their industry conference, or they're going to trade shows, they're presenting there. Here's how this typically rolls out, Dorie. Dorie Clark, is the opening keynote speaker. They hire some other wonderful paid professional speaker at the end. Everybody in the middle, though, is a VP or a CEO or a brand manager or a product manager. Are you seeing a big upswing in professionals who speak? Maybe they run into you backstage at a conference where you're keynoting and they say, hey, Dorie, how do I do what you're doing? So they're not speakers, consultants, or even entrepreneurs right now, but they're looking at this as the next chapter or as a very lucrative side gig. Or where do the professionals who speak that want to build that personal brand, that want to build the career insurance, where do they play into all of this?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, David. I mean, probably anyone who's listening to this, who's, active as a professional speaker, has heard lots of folks, lots of friends and colleagues say, how do I do what you're doing? Because it does look like a good gig, and it is a good gig in an objective way. I mean, maybe not when we've missed the connecting flight in Toledo or whatever, but most of the time it's a very good gig. I think one thing that they're probably very attuned to is that if you are speaking at a conference and you are, the VP of brand, blah, 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 for a given company, you're probably not getting paid because, we're getting paid as professional speakers. But typically the organizer is not going to be paying somebody from a company because the implicit understanding is, oh, well, you get paid by your company. This is just part of marketing your company. This is part of your job. So we don't have to pay you extra. And so, that person would say, wait, well, I'm doing the same job up there on stage. Why am I not getting paid? And I think that the answer to that, what this goes to is that the reason that person is currently up on stage, they may be a great speaker, they may be very knowledgeable, but they did not, I say this with love, they did not earn the speaking spot themselves. They are speaking because they are affiliated with a given company. And the minute they leave that company, they stop being an attractive speaker. It's that the organizer wants someone from Google, someone from Facebook, not necessarily you. And so the challenge that folks need to understand and embrace is, okay, you've got to change that dynamic. You've got to make it so that the company that you're with, if you are with a company or if you're on your own, so that that is irrelevant. And what people want is you, your name. And we earn that through the factors that I talked about earlier, but I would say especially content creation. This is where people can really move the needle because it's about sharing independent ideas and your own independent take. Right now, you might be interesting because people want to hear what quote unquote Google thinks about a certain thing, if that is your company that you're with. But by creating your own IP, whether that's podcasts or videos or blogs or books or something like that, that is really what sets you apart and makes you desirable as an individual.
Man, that's a cold, cruel world, right? No, we want someone that has Facebook on their business card. We don't really want you. Well, but let's dig into this just for another quick minute because I'm thinking of, maybe the most obvious and the most successful example is Sheryl Sandberg, speaking of Facebook. She has not left Facebook as of this recording, and she's writing books. She's writing multiple books. She's doing a tremendous amount of thought leadership. She's out there speaking. I'm even thinking, let's go back in a time machine. And, Tim Sanders, 2 years before he left Yahoo, or Tony Hsieh, 2 years before he left Zappos, it's that kind of C-level, VP-level executive. Are those folks coming to you for help, or they just don't see the light at the other end of the tunnel yet?
Well, I think that obviously the people who are very forward thinking are doing so. I mean, I've consulted with plenty of people. I mean, partners at major consulting firms.
Exactly.
Yeah, folks of that ilk. A woman who's a VP at, she's very interesting, a very prominent Fortune 500 manufacturing company. The people who are really thinking a few moves ahead on the chessboard get it. But I think that it is sort of a slow and dawning realization that a lot of people don't fully grasp until they leave, that while they may have been very, very desirable in the marketplace when they had the brand of the company behind them, that will change when they leave, that their calls are not going to be returned so fast. They might not even be returned at all, which is really alarming. And it's a terrible feeling. I mean, we all want to be appreciated for who we are, not what our affiliations are. It feels like junior high or something. But I think that, if we are going to face reality head on, we have to understand that in a very, very competitive, noisy, crowded world, we have to earn the right to be heard. And our ideas may be really good, but we need to prove it to people. We need to show them that they are good and have humility about it. I mean, I overheard a conversation. I didn't say anything. I did not weigh in because I was not part of this, but I overheard a conversation actually at the NSA convention recently. There was a woman who was complaining to a friend of hers. She was saying that she had spoken at a conference recently and she had done a breakout session. She had been in this conference room that was like 1,000,000 miles away from the main stage, etc. And then she discovered that the next day, one of the keynotes who had the main stage and, thousands of people were there, that this person basically had the same message as her, same topic, same message. And she's like, why him? I have the same message. Why didn't they give me a chance? I could have done great. And, she's going on and she's saying, well, yeah, this guy has a bigger platform than me. Yeah, this guy has a bigger brand than me, but our message is the same and I could have done it better and I'm a better speaker. And, in my mind's eye, I wanted to stop her right there and be like, you just answered your own question. This guy's brand is bigger than yours. This guy's platform is bigger than yours. That is the reason you are focusing on the wrong metrics and being upset about the wrong things. You need to be taking action to grow your brand, to grow your platform. And once you do, you will have earned the right to share your brilliant ideas on the main stage. I think that's what we need to understand.
Yeah, you're really profound. I mean, a lot of people, they think it's a meritocracy. And in a way it is, but in a way it's two meritocracies, right? There's the meritocracy of your content, which is important, of course, but there's also the meritocracy of your marketing and branding. And sadly, what I've seen, and maybe you've seen it too, the person that has better marketing, branding, positioning, and distinction, and maybe weaker content is always going to win.
That's right. And, it's really about getting into the heads of the organizers. The person who has the stronger brand is going to be the person, frankly, that is exciting to the attendees because they'll say, oh, I've heard of him. Yeah, he's cool. I want to see him. And I mean, that's really what it's about in many cases, not every case. I mean, if we're talking more about a training workshop, which again is usually lower priced, then, maybe it is strictly about, okay, well, what are the desired outcomes and who can create the desired outcomes. But if you're talking about a large scale event, which are the most lucrative ones, as an organizer, you want a name that people have heard of, that they will be impressed by. They'll be like, oh, good job. Wow, you got him. And if you are not yet that person, your goal needs to be to become that person.
Yes, very much so. So you mentioned that you've got your fabulous Entrepreneurial You book, which is the latest book at this point, third in a trilogy, the way that you mentioned in the book. And you also have the online course. You also have some private coaching. You also do the half day kind of in-person mastermind meeting, strategic session with people. I want to ask you about your annual mastermind, the big kahuna, because when people graduate from any one of those offerings that are a little bit lower down on your product ladder, I'm imagining that there's a pretty big promise or a pretty big outcome from that annual mastermind. Where I've seen people make a mistake and where I've made some mistakes myself is I say, oh, I've got this big super duper program. And they say, well, David, what do I get? And I said, well, more of the same. More of the same that you got during your half-day strategic workshop. More of the same that you get in your online course. More of the same is not a compelling value prop. So how do you get people excited once they've gone through some of that, or maybe they come to you right for the big program? What's the ultimate outcome of your annual mastermind super duper program that they're excited about enrolling in?
Yeah, I think you've really identified a great sort of paradox. And I love it that you've brought that forward because I think you're spot on. That is a problem that many people have in identifying, what the real value of a mastermind is. What I would say is I really try to talk in depth with people about what their goals are and what they're looking for. And I would say that a key goal of a mastermind, the people that for whom it is the right thing, and it's not everybody for sure, but the people for whom it is the right thing are folks who, number one, are looking for a kind of ongoing support over time for their business. So meaning, there's some people who they want help with strategy and then they feel like, what, I'm good. Once I know what to do, I can go do it. And for them, all right, that's great. There's another sort of breed of person that's like, I have this big thing coming up. I'm going to be launching a book, or I'm going to be getting my podcast going, or I'm going to be really trying to take my business to the next level this year. And they want a kind of ongoing touch point to be able to check in, to have access to you, to have a sort of regular time. And that is a reason that a mastermind could be good, just to have that ongoing connection. The other thing, which I think may be even more determinative, is people who are looking for a peer group. They're looking for a community. And if someone is working one-on-one with me, that's awesome. That's very, deep dive. It's intensive. And I do have one-on-one coaching clients. But there are certain people who, when you talk to them, what they really want is a community. They want peers. They want people along the ride with them. And, that's a real need and desire. And for them, I think a mastermind is perfect. And so, being able to, so some of the things that we do, I mean, we have in-person retreats where we get together and really sort of form a cohesive community. I also, for my mastermind, have been experimenting with giving people a kind of assignment, quote unquote, sort of an area of focus every 2 weeks, and then assigning them a different person, kind of rotating person in the mastermind to have a call with, a one-on-one call to talk about that, so that we are building in a very systematic fashion deep connections between the individuals in the group. And so that's part of what I think can make for a good mastermind. My stated goal is I want everyone in the group to leave the experience feeling like they have this cadre of new friends. You're not going to be best friends with everyone, but if people can leave and say, what, I met 2 or 3 people that I'm actually, not just like, oh, they're my, mastermind colleague, but they are legitimately close friends. I would say that is my definition of success. I want to create a community that improves people's lives.
So as people are going through this, they get a kind of like a buddy system that every 2 weeks they check in with somebody new.
Yeah, that's correct. Then, of course, there's sort of standard like group calls and then our periodic in-person meetings as well.
And then the assignments that you give every 2 weeks, those are customized to that particular individual? Or do you have like themes like, okay, this is going to be, let's focus 2 weeks on, content creation. Let's focus 2 weeks on social media. Let's focus 2 weeks on this. Or, is there a David plan for the next 2 weeks? And then there's a Dorie plan for the next 2 weeks. Is that custom or is that thematic to the group?
Yeah, it's thematic to the group so that people can have sort of a shared base of understanding. But it is developed based on, when the group kicked off, people talked about the key themes that they were most interested in. And so I'm devising it based on the commonalities of those themes.
Got it. All right, last couple questions. Let's talk about some new speaker/thought leader pitfalls that you've seen and maybe some seasoned thought leader/speaker pitfalls. Where do the newer folks get stuck as you've observed it in your programs? And then where do even some seasoned folks get stuck?
I would say this one probably crosses over into a number of places, not just new speakers, but also more seasoned ones. I'll say, I don't think there's anything wrong with this, but it's just incomplete. But sometimes you will hear advice that, okay, the best way to get gigs when you're starting out, or one of the best ways, is to get referrals from more experienced speakers that can send you their gigs that maybe they have a conflict, or maybe it's too low priced for them, but it would be a great gig for you. And I think that is true. I think that's absolutely true. But I think the incomplete version that many people do is that they will send a note to somebody that they don't really even know that well. And they'll be like, hey, David, I just wanted to reach out. You speak on XYZ. I also speak on XYZ, and I'm a new speaker. And if you ever have a gig that you can't do, just keep me in mind. I'd really appreciate it. I mean, that's fine, right? That's okay. It's not the worst thing in the world for sure. And it's good because it is in your mind now. However, what's incomplete about it is that, number one, you're probably getting a lot of notes like that. Number two, what do you know about that person? I mean, if I'm referring someone to a colleague, I want to know buttoned up 100% that they are going to represent me well in referring them and that they are, this sort of high quality person, which implies that I have to know them pretty darn well. When you're approaching someone who's just a vague acquaintance, they don't have that level of certitude. And so I would say that a better solution is to think of ways that you can make yourself relevant and useful to a more experienced person. How can you become that person's friend? How can you deepen a relationship in such a way that you become a trusted resource and that they know without a shadow of a doubt that you would be a good person to refer things to? And then when you do, if you do make a request for referrals, they will be like, oh, of course. I mean, this is fresh in my mind because, just last week I referred a speech to a guy that I've known for a long time. And, it was like a $7,500 gig. And, he was so happy. It was the most he had ever gotten for a speech. And, it was a lovely gig, but it's, below my price point now. And so I just thought maybe it would be more relevant for somebody else. And the reason that I wanted to send it to this guy, number one, I know that he is good. I have seen him over time in a lot of different circumstances and have a lot of faith in his professionalism. He has a professional website, which makes it easy for me to refer people to him, which is not the case for everybody. And also he has done a lot of, I would say, really good things, quote unquote, for me. Now, I don't mean like favors exactly, but he's involved in my recognized expert community. And he's really been a leader. Like he's always, posting things or organizing meetups and get-togethers and things like that. And he has been adding value to the community. Now, that's not directly for me. It's really more aimed at other people, but it's something that I'm grateful for and I notice it. And so it makes me both confident in sending him business and want to send him business. And so I think those are the types of things that is a lot more effective than just reaching out to a quasi stranger and being like, hey, send me some gigs.
Relationship before reciprocity, right?
Absolutely.
So I want to ask you also sort of a two-pronged answer either branch of this. Is there something that as you think back that either you wish you had found out sooner about the speaker expert industry, or are there some programs or services that you discontinued just because you thought they were a good idea at the time, but they either weren't fun or weren't profitable or didn't serve your clients the way that you were hoping?
So I'm running a couple of different masterminds right now. One is a sort of higher dollar mastermind, a more intensive mastermind for people who already have, mid six-figure businesses. And then I have another mastermind, which is, a little bit less intensity and at a lower price point for people who are new entrepreneurs. I call that the scaling to six-figure mastermind. And those are great and are operating really well. However, I had been thinking about the possibility of doing a mastermind for quite a while before I actually ended up launching it. And my first sort of go at it, I would say, I guess the answer is that it took me longer to launch that and to assemble that than I thought it would. I was hoping the previous year to be able to launch a mastermind, and I was just not able to get quite enough interest and quite enough traction. And so this actually goes back to a previous thing that we were talking about, David, around the idea of having offerings at different price points. What I realized was I did not yet have enough of a group of people who had sampled working with me at lower price points to be able to then scale up and create a mastermind. I think it's very difficult. I mean, not impossible for sure. Maybe some people are smarter about this than I am, but I think it's very difficult to create, let's say a $10,000 or $20,000 or whatever mastermind, per head, if you just haven't sold at all to individuals, or if you've only, done sort of just these light, low dollar engagements. What I've discovered is that people really need to sample working with you in a relatively intensive way. And so the thing that made the difference for me in being able to have the initial traction necessary to create a mastermind is that it was successful. Because of course, in a mastermind, it's not just like you need one or two people. It's like, no, you need 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 or, whatever it is to make it a going concern. What was necessary for me was launching a 2-day mastermind weekend. It was a standalone mastermind retreat for 2 days that I did. And that actually was the germ that enabled me to go ahead and launch a more intensive one, because that created a critical mass of people who had seen what it was like to work with me and then wanted to go deeper and wanted to do more. So I think that was kind of a critical element there that I didn't realize or appreciate initially.
And was that a straight line, Dorie? In other words, people at that 2-day event were invited into the larger program right then and there?
Not right then and there, but actually they requested it, as a matter of fact. So at the end of the retreat, they're like, this is great. We want more. And I was like, okay, let me cook something up. Let me come up with the idea for a mastermind, and then I'll loop back to you. I mean, it probably would have been better if I had already sort of had that in my back pocket to offer right away, but I didn't. Instead, I was responding to their requests.
Well, that's even better. I think that's even better.
Yeah, I mean, they don't always request it, but it was very nice that they did. And so then I did dream up outline a plan, a scenario, and then a number of people from that initial group signed on, and it created enough of a core that I was able to launch it to a wider group on my mailing list.
Totally fantastic. Well, I want to talk about the trilogy, and then I want to obviously have you let people know how and where to get connected and stay connected to your empire. So Stand Out, Reinventing You, and now Entrepreneurial You, sort of a trilogy, right? 1, 2, 3 punch. What's next? I mean, I know the Entrepreneurial You book is fairly new as we're recording this. I guarantee it's going to be a bestseller for years and years to come. Is there something else? Is there like a level 4? Is there a pivot? What are you looking forward to over the next couple of years where these 3 books are going to be the rocket fuel that takes your business there?
Yeah, thank you, David. I made a very deliberate choice, actually, that 2018 was going to be the year of no book. Picture that in all caps, because since 2011, so, for the past 7 years, every single year, I have either been writing a book or launching a book. And it was a very frenetic and intense pace. And so I decided that in order to be able to recharge and develop the next batch of really excellent ideas, I was just going to take this year entirely off from the book process. And so instead, I've been focused on other things. Specifically, I have been focused on buying a condo, which I just did. And this fall, one of my projects is going to be related to further optimizing the marketing of my Recognized Expert course, and also a a smaller, lower dollar online course that I have called the Rapid Content Creation Masterclass. Also, this was, the first year that I launched my mastermind. So that was another income stream and project that I've been working on as well. So I would say in terms of really developing the next round of IP, that's something I'm going to be thinking about a little bit more next year. This is a year of optimizing.
I love the year of no book, the year of I'm going to rest for a little bit. I'm going to focus elsewhere for a little bit.
That's right.
So how do people get connected and stay connected to all these fabulous things we've been talking about and the Dorie Clark empire at large?
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for asking. I would say that the very best way for people to get me is through my website. It's dorieclark.com, DORIECLARK.com. I have more than 500 free articles available. So if people really want to dive into the content, that is a good place to do it. And especially if they are interested in these issues about entrepreneurship, about developing multiple income streams in their business, the resource that I would point them to is my 88-question Entrepreneurial You self-assessment, which helps ask you a series of questions that enables you to apply these concepts to your own business and figure out how and where to develop multiple income streams there. And folks can get that for free either on my website or just by going directly to dorieclark.com/entrepreneur.
Nice. All right, Dorie Clark, we are all going to be reading, rereading, highlighting, and dog-earing our copy of Entrepreneurial You. We're going to go to the website. We're going to download the 88-question checklist, which I've already downloaded. And I'll tell you, that is very, very, very comprehensive. It is intense. So if you guys want to put yourself through a very thorough audit and assessment of your assets and your strategies and some great tactics and some really smart tools and scripts, I would avail myself of everything that Dorie has just offered. We're also going to have those in the show notes. So the show notes are going to be posted with this episode. Do not miss that. And Dorie, this was great. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, thank you, David. Great to speak with you.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.